Under the cloak of a pre-dawn August sky in 1888, the world ran on horsepower, literally. The clatter of hooves on cobblestone was the sound of progress. But on this morning, a different sound was about to break the silence. The air in Mannheim, Germany was thick with mist, clinging to the ornate facades of Victorian buildings as the town slept, utterly unaware that in a small workshop, a revolution was gathering dust. A revolution that so far had failed to ignite the public's imagination. A woman, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and fierce determination, tiptoed from her home. This wasn't just an adventure, it was an act of desperation. She was Bertha Benz, and she wasn't just the wife of the inventor, Carl Benz. She was his business partner, the financial backbone of his dream, having invested her entire dowry into his work. But Carl, a brilliant engineer, was a terrible marketer. His creation, the patent motorwagon, was dismissed by the public as a noisy, smelly, unreliable contraption. A folly. The press mocked it, and potential buyers stayed away. Financial ruin loomed over the Benz family, threatening to extinguish their dream before it ever truly began. Bertha knew that talk and patents were not enough. The world needed to see what this machine could do. So she hatched a plan in secret, without even telling her husband. She would undertake the first ever long-distance automobile journey. With her two teenage sons, Eugen and Richard, as her co-conspirators, she was going to drive the rickety, three-wheeled vehicle over 60 miles to her mother's home in Pforzheim. A journey over roads meant for horses and carts, with no road signs, no gas stations, and no repair shops. She left a note on the kitchen table for Carl, simply stating they were on their way to visit her mother. She didn't mention how. Quietly, they pushed the 2.5 horsepower machine away from the house, so the noise of the engine wouldn't wake their sleeping father. Once, at a safe distance, they started it, and the silence of the dawn was shattered. That single, sputtering ignition was a gunshot starting a race into the future. This one woman, secretly taking the wheel, didn't just save her husband's invention. She lit the fuse on a 140-year explosion of innovation. A journey that would eventually give the world a name synonymous with luxury, performance, and engineering prowess: Mercedes. It's a story of how a three-pointed star came to symbolize dominance on land, sea, and air. A story of safety revolutions, like the crumple zone, that would save countless lives. It's a story of glory on the racetrack, and the deep, haunting shadow cast by a single tragic day at Le Mans. It's the story of how one car, the S-Class, would consistently define the future of technology for everyone. One name, one star, and 140 years of relentless innovation. And it all began here, in the dark, with one woman who dared to drive. Our story begins not with a star, but with a man named Carl Benz. In the late 19th century, in the industrial heart of Mannheim, Germany, Benz was a man possessed. He wasn't just an engineer or a businessman who had founded his company, Benz & in 1883. He was a dreamer, consumed by a single, powerful, and frankly audacious idea. He saw the world not just as it was, a place powered by steam and muscle, but as it could be. He envisioned a future of personal freedom, of mobility, untethered from the limitations of the horse. This vision wasn't just a passing fancy. It was the core of his being, the engine that drove him through years of doubt and difficulty. For years, his workshop was a sanctuary of relentless creation. The air hung thick with the smell of oil and hot metal. Here, Carl poured his heart, his mind, and what little money his family had into a revolutionary concept, a lightweight integrated vehicle that could move under its own power. This wasn't about strapping an engine to a cart. No, Carl's vision was far more elegant. He obsessed over creating a holistic machine where the chassis, the engine, and the drivetrain worked in perfect harmony. He toiled over his single-cylinder, four-stroke engine, a marvel of its time. He engineered a newfangled ignition system using a spark plug and battery, a concept so advanced it bordered on science fiction. Every gear, every belt, every wheel was a problem to be solved, a piece of a puzzle that only he could see in its entirety. This obsession came at a great cost, consuming the dowry of his wife, Bertha, and pushing their finances to the absolute brink. To understand the magnitude of his dream, you have to understand his world. The late 1800s was an age dominated by the rhythmic clip-clop of hooves on cobblestone streets. The horse was the engine of society. It was reliable, it was understood. It was the unquestioned king of transport. In this context, Karl's idea of a horseless carriage wasn't just innovative, it was deeply strange. It was a radical notion, almost like something from a fantasy story, a noisy mechanical beast intruding upon a familiar organic world. Then, in 1886, after countless sleepless nights and frustrating setbacks, Karl Benz achieved a monumental breakthrough. On January 29th, he was granted German patent number 37435. It was more than a document. It was the official birth certificate for the automobile. His creation, the Benz patent motorwagen, was complete. With its 3 wire-spoked wheels, a small engine mounted under the bench seat, and a tiller for steering, it looked like nothing the world had ever seen. It was the culmination of his life's work, a tangible piece of the future. The dreamer had finally built his dream. But building it was one thing. Convincing the world to believe in it was another challenge entirely. Despite its engineering brilliance, the patent motorwagen was far from a commercial success. In fact, it was a public spectacle, and not in a good way. During its first public outings on the streets of Mannheim, people would stop and stare, their curiosity quickly turning to mockery and fear. They would laugh at its clumsy movements and cover their ears from the racket. They would shake their heads in disbelief, unable to comprehend what they were seeing. The machine was fragile, difficult to start, and prone to breaking down. It frightened horses, causing chaos in the streets. To the public, it wasn't a revolution. It was a ridiculous and dangerous nuisance. The press was merciless. They called it a devil's wagon and a stinking monster. The questions were always the same. Why would anyone want this loud, smelly, unreliable contraption when a perfectly good horse could do the job quietly and dependably? A horse didn't need a pharmacist to sell it fuel, and it could find its own way home. The criticism mounted, and sales were non-existent. Karl, a genius of mechanics but a novice in marketing, grew despondent. He had poured his soul into the machine, yet the world rejected it. He began to retreat, consumed by self-doubt, tinkering endlessly in his workshop, but too discouraged to truly champion his creation. His incredible invention, the machine that would one day change the world, was in danger of becoming nothing more than a footnote in history, a failed inventor's folly. Bertha Benz understood something profound that her brilliant husband did not. The machine needed to tell its own story. It needed a grand adventure that would capture the public's imagination. Her chosen destination was Pforzheim, her mother's hometown, located about 106 kilometers or 66 miles to the south. The most crucial element of her plan was secrecy. Bertha knew Karl would never approve. Her sons were her co-conspirators, excited by the prospect of the secret journey. She would leave a simple note on the kitchen table, informing him after the fact that she and their sons had gone to visit her mother in Pforzheim. In the quiet moments just before sunrise, Bertha, Eugen, and Richard carefully pushed the 3-wheeled motorwagen down the street, away from their sleeping house. Starting the motorwagen was not as simple as turning a key. Richard spun the large flywheel, while Bertha and Eugen managed the controls. With a startling roar, the engine caught. They lurched forward, leaving Mannheim behind in a cloud of dust and ambition. The first few miles were a blur of wonder and discovery. For Bertha, it was a moment of profound vindication. The machine was working. One of the first and most critical problems they faced was fuel. The patent motorwagen ran on lygroin, a volatile petroleum solvent that was not readily available. In 1888, there were no gas stations. The car's small tank was not nearly enough for a journey of 106 kilometers. Bertha's brilliant deduction led them to the small town of Wiesloch. There, she steered the car toward the local pharmacy, the Stadtapotheke. Imagine the pharmacist's surprise when this determined woman asked not for medicine, but for his entire stock of lygroin, 10 liters of it, to power the horseless carriage parked outside. In that moment, the Stadtapotheke in Wiesloch, without any fanfare, became the world's very first filling station. But the open road of 1888 was a rugged, unpredictable landscape, a world not yet built for the automobile. The journey, which began with such optimism, was far from smooth. It wasn't long before the patent motor wagon faced its first critical test, when the rhythmic chugging of the engine faltered and fell into an unnerving silence. They were stranded. A lesser person might have despaired, but Bertha was a partner in this invention. She quickly diagnosed the problem. A crucial fuel line had become clogged with dirt and debris from the dusty roads, leaving them stranded. This was a problem no one had ever encountered before, because no one had ever driven this far. Without a moment's hesitation, Bertha reached up to her hat, a symbol of her social standing, and transformed it into a vital tool. She pulled a long, thin hatpin from its fabric. With the steady hands of a surgeon and the sharp mind of an engineer, she used it to carefully clear the blockage from the delicate fuel line. The engine roared back to life, a testament to her ingenuity. The challenges, however, kept coming. As they navigated the winding, hilly terrain toward the Black Forest, a new, more terrifying problem emerged. The car's simple wooden block brakes were wearing down at an alarming rate. Each descent became a heart-pounding exercise in controlled fear. When the car's wooden brakes began to wear down dangerously, Bertha knew she had to act. She sought out a local blacksmith in the next village, a man who had likely never seen such a machine. She explained the novel concept of a brake and its failure. Together, in a remarkable moment of collaborative innovation, they devised a solution. The blacksmith fashioned new brake linings out of scraps of tough leather, creating the world's first set of brake pads. It wasn't just a roadside repair, it was a revolutionary upgrade born from sheer necessity, an invention that would become standard on all future automobiles. But perhaps the most grueling test was the fight against gravity itself. The car's engine was not powerful enough to conquer steep inclines on its own. Carl Benz's brilliant design had one significant limitation: a single gear. Time and again, the trio had to get out and push, their fine clothes covered in dust and sweat. Bertha and her teenage sons had to dig their heels in and physically push the future up the hill. Yet this struggle was not a failure, it was invaluable data. Bertha was conducting the world's first automotive road test, and she was not just completing a journey. She was writing the list of improvements that would lead directly to Carl Benz, inventing the first transmission, shaping the future of every car to come. As dusk began to settle over the German countryside, a strange, sputtering vehicle rolled into the town of Pforzheim. Bertha Benz and her sons had done it. They arrived at her mother's house to a reception of utter shock and disbelief, which quickly turned into overwhelming joy and admiration. The first thing Bertha did was send a telegram to her husband, Karl. The message was simple and profound: arrived safely in Pforzheim. People flocked to see the incredible machine that had traveled all the way from Mannheim. They were no longer laughing, they were looking at it with newfound respect and awe. Bertha Benz's secret ride was the spark that ignited the automotive revolution. Orders for the patent motor wagon began to pour in, leading to the global brand Mercedes-Benz. Carl Benz invented the car, but it was Bertha Benz who drove it into the public consciousness. She was the first marketeer, the first test engineer, and the first true believer. Today, as we drive our modern cars on paved superhighways, it is easy to forget the pioneers who made it all possible. Thanks to Bertha's courage, millions of us can drive today. Let her story inspire you to take the wheel of your own dreams. If you want more inspiring stories from automotive history, don't forget to subscribe.